Well, thanks so much for having the time to talk to me. I've read about you, and I've read some of your books and your works, and I think it fits. I think it fits really, really well into the your work would fit really well into the project that I'm working on. The book is sort of a look right at where we are right now in terms of communicating with animals and listening to animals in the natural world. So sort of I've talked to scientists, and then also the way that some trainers have shifted from a paradigm of telling to listening, in with various animals. And then, the third part, and what I'm finding is the most interesting and the most important, is everything else, all the people working with outside of science and training, in their various disciplines.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And yeah, and so that's where I am. My manuscript will be in this summer and published next spring, and
Hmm.
and so I'm sort of, I have quite a few animals, and we live on an old farm, and I'm kind of getting to know we have a wood, and I'm getting to know the wood, and the various animals and creatures that inhabit that space.
Yeah,
So that's the
yeah.
project. That's what I'm working on. So
Beautiful,
yeah,
beautiful. Yeah. Well, this is a topic that's close to my heart because of how I was raised and my background and how I learned how to be a better human through connecting with animals and listening to what is called nature speak, which is the language that is used by all of life. All of life is in constant communication with each other, rather than communication being one-on-one. Communication in nature is more like a web, with everything interacting all the time and listening on many levels. It's not just audio, but all of the senses are involved in quote unquote listening. So it's really a broad ranging topic. And
yeah.
yeah,
I love the idea of what you just said is really profound. This kind of shift from thinking that conversation needs to be one-on-one to there being a sort of a broader way of looking at communication.
hmm hmm
So can you tell me about that from your perspective?
yeah, I sure can. I'll give you a story that'll uh, help to bring that across. When I was in my mid-20s, I lived with a family of wolves. They adopted me, and I lived with them for 5 years. And I consider that to be my first true family because my family of origin was very dysfunctional. I had an alcoholic father and a frantic mother who was a beautiful nurturer. She did all she could for us, but we were always well clothed and well fed, but she didn't have the emotional presence for us because of struggling with my father, her relationship with my father.
Mhm.
Um, so I didn't really get the nurturance I needed or the support I needed to be the person I was. And I turned to nature. Nature was my mother, and nature is the mother of all anyway. So I felt fulfilled in that way, but not in terms of human relationship. I didn't have that sense of family kinship.
Mhm.
And the wolf pack, the wolf family, all wolf packs are actually families. They're extended families. They're not packs as we define them.
Mhm.
I remember one time I had a couple of businesses in town at the time, and I would come home in the evening and rejoin my pack. And I was coming home one night, and I was just really sad, on the verge of depression. I was on my second marriage already, and I wasn't feeling fulfilled in the relationship, and I was struggling with some of my employees at work, and I had issues with my father, and who didn't live close by, but still he was my dad, and I wanted to have his recognition, which I
Mhm.
wasn't receiving because I wasn't doing what he wanted me to do. So I came home that night, and all I wanted to do was put on a happy face and go in and join my wolf family. And what wolves do when a wayward pack member comes home and joins the pack is that they all get together and they are jumping on each other and rubbing bodies together and licking each other's faces and howling. And it's just such a beautiful homecoming. They didn't do that. They saw right through me.
Mhm.
You know, I put on a happy face and I was all ready to go with them. And they saw me for who I really was in a psycho-emotional level at that time. I could not fool them.
Mhm.
And they were there for me. They were empathetic. They were caring. They were present. And it wasn't a joyful time. They were there to support me. They were there to give me the care that I needed. And I just melted right there. I broke into tears. It was authentic communication.
Yeah.
And to them, I wasn't a human and they were wolves. We were all people together. It didn't matter. The labels didn't matter. It was
That
just
that
so
gets me
beautiful.
right here. I feel this
Oh boy.
very strong
Yeah.
feeling. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I just come to tears retelling it because
yeah,
that was really my awakening to what it is to be truly in relationship and truly in communication. Because relationship is communication.
hmm
There's
hmm
no relationship without heart to heart communication.
yeah,
And that goes way beyond the verbal. You know, verbal communication is only about 70% accurate. What we do when we want to express something verbally, we have a thought or a feeling, and we grab words to wrap around it as closely as we can, and then we communicate it. And if we're good verbalizers, and we have an extensive vocabulary, we can hit about 70%, but it is not pure, authentic communication. Sometimes, in spite of that, we can feel beyond the words and between the words to get to what's really being conveyed.
yeah.
Then we feel that relationship. However, if we can open to total communication rather than just verbal communication, then we're looking at audio cues and the cues of how other beings around us are reacting and relating. Um, we're picking up on intuitive impulses, body language, facial expression. There's so much to total communication.
Mhm.
And once we can key into that and not be so verbally oriented, we are approaching the communication that is enjoyed by all of nature. And we are nature. Our nature is nature. So the more we can return to that, and
Mhm.
uh, having relationships with other animals is really a good exercise. It's good practice because that's the way they communicate. If I have a dog, I can rattle all the words I want toward that dog. But if I'm really going to communicate with that dog, I need to communicate in a total communication fashion. I need to use touch. I need to use body expression. I need to use movement, and then we start connecting.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think it's interesting what you said about intuition. So one of the things I've noticed that in the scientists that especially that the kind of pure in the lab scientists that I've spoken to is the thing that always seems to be missing from their work, and the work is very important and very insightful in their specific area, but there's no place for intuition. It's just a place for um, interpretation of what is perceived to be
Yeah,
objective data, which isn't obviously, I don't really know that anything's ever objective, but what they would perceive to be objective data.
exactly.
So, what in your opinion, can you just talk to me, whatever comes up, about intuition and the role of intuition in communicating with the natural world?
Yeah. I see the term intuition as in the same way I would see the term miracle. We attach the term miracle to whatever we don't understand, something that happens, a miraculous event. Well,
Mhm,
there is a rational explanation for it if we can comprehend what's really going on.
mhm,
There's substance there. It's not just divine intervention and poof. There's an actual cause and effect relationship there. And the
mhm,
same with intuition. we label intuitive communication as anything we can't really comprehend, anything we don't understand, anything that doesn't fall within the realm of the five senses. So there is the sense of smell, for example. Um, Smell is our most primal sense. And when we get close enough to smell somebody, to smell somebody's breath, to smell their clothing, we're picking up picking up impressions that are subconscious impressions that are very meaningful to us. If I'm meeting with a farmer, for example, I pick up the smell of the farm, the smell of the cows or the goats or whatever, and
Mhm.
that's telling me something. Oh, I have a sense of who this person is and what this person was doing this morning. That's a part of the context for the communication that's occurring.
Mhm.
So if this person is talking with me um, about what his evening is going to be like and where he needs to be, I understand because, oh, this person's a farmer. I know what this person does. So there's that nonverbal aspect to communication. And if I don't have, if I'm not in rational, uh, if I don't have a rational grasp of that, I'm still picking up that level of communication, quote unquote, intuitively.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's an example.
Mhm. Yeah. And so something that has come up a little bit. So I have a little horse who's a rescue horse, and I've been very, very slowly and gently earning his trust. And sometimes when I go down to spend time with him, this feeling of anxiety comes up in me, and I've been trying to figure out, am I feeling, whose anxiety am I feeling? Where
Mm-hmm.
does that lie?
Yeah.
So it's something really interesting to me is the amount of things that you pick up, from the environment or from the world around that we might ascribe to ourselves, but actually are coming from, there are actually signs and communications from elsewhere.
Yeah. Very important. It's all about relationship.
Mm-hmm.
My feelings are not just my feelings. My impressions are not just my impressions. They're relational feelings, they're relational impressions.
Yeah, yeah. So going back to the beginning, so you found sort of solace in nature as a child. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
And then how did it come about that can you tell me the story of how it came about that you met the wolves and became a member of the pack?
Yeah. 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 Um, it's, let's see where to start. It's a long story.
That's okay.
Okay. I'll give you the thousand word version. And
Okay.
if you want to explore any tangent, just let me know. And by the way, I don't mind being interrupted because I don't consider it an interruption. Because true communication is based on it's interactive. It's not just one monologue followed by another monologue.
Yeah.
That's not true communication.
Okay.
Uh, I had a music store at the time, a record store, and I knew a lot of my customers on a first name basis, and they knew why I had the business. It was I had the business in order to make some money to be able to buy a piece of land up in the wilderness in the North Country in northern Wisconsin, in order to form a native-based community, in order to live in community with all of nature. And they knew my connection with wolf spirit because wolf was a symbol of the wilderness. And one of my customers came in one day and he said, "Hey, Tamarack, I was just up north and I stopped at this little roadside zoo. Back then, there were a lot of small little uh, gift shops, and they had a few animals. You know, they'd have a couple of deer
Mm-hmm.
in the cages, and maybe a bear and a couple foxes, and you could go and buy some popcorn to feed the bear or pet the fawn. You know, it was
Yeah.
in the tourist country up north. It was very common back then.
Right.
So one of these little roadside zoos had a pair of wolves, and this man stopped there, and he saw that the male wolf was just pacing the pen. It was just a small pen, about 8 by 8 feet, and the male was just pacing back and forth and back and forth and panting. And the female was laying there, and she wasn't looking good at all. Her teats were just full of milk, and she was laying there, obviously in pain. But there weren't any pups. So um, he asked the owner, "What's the story here?" And he said, "Well, this pair of wolves I got from the Walt Disney organization. Are you familiar with Walt Disney? And okay,
Yeah.
well, they did a program. This was back in the 1960s called Lobo,
Okay.
and it was a story about a lone wolf who found a mate with another wolf, and had pups. And then, after the Disney organization was done with the pair of wolves, after they were done filming, they went to an organization called a program called Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I don't know if you ever
Right.
heard of it. It was
No, no.
a popular program at the time.
Mhm.
Um, these two people, these two zoologists, would travel around and film wild animals, and it was a weekly program on television.
Right.
And they filmed a pair of wolves having pups again, and
Mhm.
they billed it as this being wild wolves, and they were filming these wolves in the wilderness, but they weren't at all. They were this pair of wolves that the Disney organization passed on to them.
Right.
And when the Wild Kingdom organization was done with the pair, they went to this roadside zoo.
Um,
Yeah, sad story.
yeah. Yeah.
This
It's
is
a
what,
sad common story, isn't it, about
yeah,
people using animals to their end and then passing
exactly,
them on.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the time, this is one of the last two wild wolves in Wisconsin, south of Lake Superior. They were trapped in
Mhm.
order to be used by these filmers.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
wolves went extinct after that in this area.
Wow. So those two wolves had been trapped in order to be in the Disney. There's something really horrible about the fact they were trapped from the wild, taken from the wild to probably portray wild wolves in a Disney movie.
Yes.
Then sort of disguised as wild wolves to be filmed for another show,
Yeah.
and then brought to captivity. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Sad story about
Yeah.
our actually reflecting our disconnection from nature, or else we would never
Hmm.
do that. We wouldn't
Yeah.
have to do that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another beautiful side story about the human-wolf relationship, which goes way, way back to primeval times. Wolves, we evolved with wolves, and we learned a lot about how to live in clan and how to hunt as a unit by following wolf packs and scavenging off of their kills. It's a beautiful story. That's that's another book.
Yeah.
But getting back to this story, and that's why we have such a connection with canines. You know,
Hmm.
there's this saying that man is dog's best, or dogs are man's best friend. It works in
Hmm.
reverse too, of course.
Hmm.
And that's the reason we have this intrinsic connection. We have this DNA imprinting that just gives us this soft spot for canines, for dogs. And it works both ways, because with wolves, people either love or hate them. It goes
Yeah.
either way. There's
Yeah.
nobody's neutral about wolves, and that's why we have this biological connection with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can't imagine why anyone hates wolves, but I know there are people like that. But
Mhm.
it's almost like, do you think it's like a fear of our wild self or something? I always wonder, people, because they're usually not meta wolf people who don't like them.
Yeah.
So almost it's they don't like what they represent.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, I do a lot of work in emotional healing, and I've come to realize that love and hate are the same core emotion. There's no difference. We think they're polar opposites, but they're not. Um, I can be in love with a woman and and she betrays me.
Mhm.
And then I say, I hate you. I never want to see you again. That is the total opposite of what I'm really feeling. That's an ego response. When I say I hate you, what I'm really saying is I love you so deeply that I feel so hurt that I
Mhm.
cannot be with you in the way I would like to be with you. It's
Yeah.
not hate at all.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting you say that. That's sort of, how I've reflected on this quite a lot in the last couple of years, especially because my kids have the older ones are now teenagers, and the when there's something about another person that you really dislike, I've noticed it tends to be because it's something that you don't like the same thing in yourself, and that's just sort of shining a light.
Beautiful, beautiful awareness. Yeah, it's just an externalization of what's going on inside us. And they're
Mhm.
actually doing us a favor because they are mirroring something back to us. And if we can recognize that, we can embrace this relationship and see it as being a beautiful stepping stone toward our own self-awareness and self-healing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so love and hate being part of the same thing seems to be, humans seem to have a tendency to want to polarize things, like, and
Yeah,
rather than seeing a continuum.
exactly, exactly. And that's what we've done with civilization and wilderness, with man and nature, is this polarization. And our
Hmm.
nature is nature. There is no separation.
Hmm.
I have a
Yeah.
friend, just a little aside, I have a friend who lives in the Bronx, right in the middle of New York City,
Hmm.
and she writes a nature column, believe it or not, based on nature in New York City.
Oh, wow.
She goes out at night and she sees raccoons and foxes running around. She
Hmm.
lives on the sixth floor of an apartment building. Um, People have planters out on their balconies, on their decks, and hummingbirds come to sip nectar from the flowers. And there are bees in the city and ants. And she goes to the park and she sees the animals there, the birds and the pigeons on the buildings. As
Hmm.
far as pigeons are concerned, these buildings are natural cliffs that they would naturally nest on.
Yeah.
And the peregrine falcons are there who live on by predating the pigeons. There's all kinds of life in the city. It's not just sterile concrete by any means. Nature's
Yeah.
everywhere.
I love that.
Any little
Yeah.
crack, yeah, any little crack where a seed can fall, seed is going to take root and start busting up the concrete. And
Hmm.
just nature's always restoring herself.
Yeah. Somebody I know talks about how nature doesn't like bare land. Nature,
Mm,
will always restore and think, that the rewilding movement in the UK, that, um, they, there's somebody who took a kind of stately home that had always had these huge manicured grounds, and their ancestors had lived in it for 400 years, and these kind of big artificial kind of cattle fields, and had they brought it back to nature just by leaving it alone,
mm,
and how it changed the ecosystem and brought all these species in, and a land that had previously been kept bare, grew these amazing new ecosystems. Well, they're not new, the ecosystems that were there in the first place, and yeah, I like the idea that wherever there's space, nature creates.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
beautiful, beautiful.
So going back, so the wolves then were at the roadside zoo.
Yeah, the he asked where the pups were. Obviously, the mother wolf had pups,
Mhm.
and he said, "Well, I've got them in the house. I took them away from the mother so that they would not, so that they could be imprinted on humans."
Mhm.
And my friend asked if he could see them, so he said, "Yeah, sure." So the man's name was Jim. So he brought my friend in the house and into the bathroom, and my friend wondered, "Why are we going to the bathroom?" Well, the wolf pups were in the tub, in the bathtub. So they were like a mess in the house. They were only 11 days old. Their eyes weren't open yet.
Oh, wow.
And he had two daughters, maybe 8 and 10 years of age. and they adopted the pups, and the male pups, they had blue ribbons around their necks, and in the female pups, they had pink ribbons around their necks, and they were bottle feeding them. They were their little puppies, and
Mhm.
um, they were just so lovingly taking care of the pups, nurturing the pups, which was beautiful. And my friend asked what was going to happen to the pups, uh, and the guy said, "Well, I don't know. Good question." So when my friend came back to town, he stopped at the store and he said, "Hey, Tamarack, I know you have this real connection with wolves, with wolf spirit." Well, and he just told me the story that I just told you.
Mhm.
And I had one of my staff take over my position at the store, and I hopped in my car and I took a ride up there right away. And I I stopped and I told Jim who I was and that my friend was just there a couple hours ago, and he told me the story about the wolves here, and I would wonder if I could see the pups as well. And he said, "Well, sure, come on in. Be glad to show them to you." So he showed them to me, and my heart just reached out to the pups right away. I knew they needed something. They were getting beautiful care right there, right then and there, that's for sure. But
Mhm.
what was going to end up with them? I saw the parents. I saw their condition, and it was beyond me to do anything about that. But the pups are new life. So I asked him what he's going to do with the pups again, and he said, "I don't know. We're going away this weekend, and we have to find somewhere for the pups before this weekend because we can't take the pups with us. The whole
Mhm.
family's going." And I asked how much he wanted. Would he like to sell the pups? And he said, "Well, I guess so. But you have to have a permit to harbor wolves. You have to have a specific type of pen and everything to
Mhm.
meet regulations for harboring wild animals." And I said, "Yeah, I can do that. I have land. I have the resources. I can do that." And he said, "Okay. Well, the going price for a wolf pup is $200. That was a lot of money back then. This was
Yeah.
back in 1972,
Okay.
and $200 then was probably more like $600 now, $600 or $800. And I thought about it and I said, "Well, will you take $400 for the four?" And he said yes right away. He was just so glad. So I was given a cardboard box with four wolf pups and a bottle feeder and some formula for feeding them.
Mhm.
And the girls were sad to see the pups go, but their parents um, just reinforced the fact that these pups are going to a good home. This man really cares for them and is going to take care of them. So they felt good overall.
Mhm.
So I came home with four wolf pups, and yeah, and I had some acreage, so I had some friends of mine help me to build a large enclosed area for them. I wasn't going to put them in a little pen at all. I wanted them to be as free roaming as possible.
Yeah.
And as they grew up, I had them out of the pen a lot. We were out running a lot. Uh, and in raising the pups, right away, speaking of communication and animal-human communication, they were communicating with each other right away. I could see which animals, which of the pups were nurturers, which ones were the going to be the quote unquote leaders, the coordinators of the group, and which were going to be the guardians, the protectors, because they were acting it out right away at 11 days of age before they opened their eyes. It was there. I
Wow.
could see I could see their archetypes.
Mhm.
And sure enough, they grew up fulfilling those archetypes. That's the way they were. And as they grew up, I was their parent. And as they matured, I was no longer their parent, but they adopted me into their pack as a peer rather than a
Mhm.
parent.
Right.
And
Right.
that was a switch in relationship, and it's a switch in relationship in all social animals. When the children grow up, they assume a different role once they reach maturity, and same with the wolf pack. And it was amazing because these poor wolves were never in the wilds. They never hunted before.
Mhm.
They never lived in a pack structure, but they knew it. They just knew it. It was imprinted in their DNA. They
Yeah.
knew how to hunt. They knew how to coordinate a hunt. They knew how to live interactively. They knew how to communicate. They knew what the native elders I studied with when I was young called nature speak. That's the universal language of all nature. They
Mhm.
just knew it. And I was imprinted with that, and it came alive in me as well. It was just so beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
that's beautiful. Wow.
so that's the story in a nutshell.
That's an amazing story. And it's interesting what you say about, yeah, we have at the moment, we have a pair of pet, they're going to remain as pets their whole lives, piglets. And um, they're sisters from the same little litter. And it's the same thing I could tell from a few days old.
Ah, yeah.
The one's going to be the very friendly, outgoing one, but also need the most reassurance. And the other one's the quiet, little bit more aloof but very confident one who can figure
Uh-huh.
things out.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and then
Uh-huh.
that's absolutely what those are the tiny little signs they showed at first, and that is absolutely what they are like as
Beautiful.
slightly
Same
older.
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
um
know,
go on.
that's a form of communication. That's relational communication because this diversity of archetypes is needed for all social animals because there are various niches that have to be fulfilled.
Mhm.
And it's programmed that a certain percentage of animals, social animals, are going to be the guardians, a certain percentage are going to be the nurturers, and a certain percentage are going to be the coordinators,
Mhm.
the
Right,
voices.
right, right. Well, that makes sense.
Otherwise,
Yeah,
yeah, otherwise there'd be lopsided relationship in a social unit.
yeah, yeah.
It's the same. It's the same with us humans. We are born and intended, uh, genetically programmed, genetically intended to fulfill certain roles,
Mhm.
which are very stifled in our culture, which is why a lot of people struggle with identity and struggle with any sense of fulfillment in their lives because there are pre-programmed roles that we're supposed to fit into. And it's very few of us who are given the freedom, first of all, the freedom as children to blossom into who we are intended to be. But rather, the teacher has another idea as to who we're supposed to be. Our parents have another idea as to who we're supposed to be. Our culture has expectations on who and how we're supposed to be.
Mhm.
And that's a lot of reason for the struggle between children and their parents and a lot of teenage angst. A lot of what is considered to be rebellion is just a screaming out to try to find out who we are.
Mhm. And a rejection of the role that somebody else has ascribed to us.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's something with our kids. So I definitely went through that with especially my father had an idea of who I
Mm.
was should be, and that's something we've tried very hard with. We've got five kids, and I've never said, "Oh, you're the this one." You know how that in many families it's like, "Oh, they're the sporty one. You're the
Yeah,
creative one."
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
never
yeah.
said that.
Good
I
for
learned.
you. Good for your
Yeah.
kids. Yeah. Well, you're the right person to write this book because that is a form of communication too. And it's a form of human to animal communication, you might say, because we need to recognize that we humans are animals also. We talk about humans and we talk about animals. Well, we are animals.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no difference. There's no difference.
And so within that wolf pack, what was your role in the pack?
My role was as a guardian,
Hmm.
and it's good because my natural proclivity is to be a guardian anyway. So, and I played that role for the wolves because I had to take care of a number of things as a guardian for the family.
Hmm.
And played that role outside of the pack and within the pack. So it worked out very nicely. It was sort of a seamless relationship.
Hmm.
I could slide into the pack whenever I did, and I would be right at home as a guardian, doing the same thing I did outside the fence, you might say, or
Right,
away from the
right.
pack.
Yeah.
But you know,
And
just a quick aside that I think is relevant here to what you're doing. The intuitive communication, they sensed when I was around, even though they couldn't see me or smell me. There's some way they knew I was around. When I would go in the house, I would not be with the pack literally, but they still considered me to be within the realm of the pack, within the realm of the family, and they acted as though I was still there. So it was really easy if I was around, even though I was out of sight, to come and go within the pack. And it's
yeah,
just as though I was there all the time.
wow. That's amazing. That's that they had that ability to conceive of you being part of the pack even when you were out in the human world doing things and then coming back.
Yeah, yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah,
Yeah, there
yeah.
was never that separation.
Hmm.
And this has to do with the basic component of true communication, of full communication, and that is trust. There has to be trust. If there's mistrust of any kind, there are boundaries, and not just physical boundaries, but these are boundaries to communication.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's definitely going back to that little horse that I'm working with. He that's been a very valuable lesson to me.
Mhm.
I taught him a little signal that if I just reach out my hand in a sort of a very gentle way and he touches my hand, then it means that he's okay. He'd like to be petted. And if I reach out my hand
Mhm.
and he doesn't touch it, then okay, then he doesn't want to be petted. And the moment that I think he understood that I would honor that choice and not, people always want to touch animals all the time,
Mhm.
um, he almost jumped. He was startled, I think, when that realization hit, because now he trusts. And since that moment, we have this lovely trust because he knows that if I say I won't do something, then I mean it. And it's not like my human desire to do it anyway is not going to overcome what I promised, And
Yeah.
I think you're right. Trust is something that people don't think about being important in communication, I think.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
Beautiful.
do you could you talk to me a little bit more about archetypes and the importance of archetypes? So I don't really know a lot about archetypes.
Sure. Sure. There are a number of classical approaches to archetypes. Um, Carl Jung, the
Mhm.
psychiatrist, contemporary of Freud's, did a lot of work in archetypes. He defines 8 different archetypes. And there are a number of other people who've done work on archetypes. Some people see 5 archetypes, some people see 8, some people see more, some people see less, and define them differently and have different labels for them. What I learned from the Indian elders I studied with is that there are 3 basic archetypes, and that's what I find in nature. And those 3 archetypes are the nurturer, and in a native clan or native tribe, the nurturers are the ones who are most directly connected with the children, caring for the elders. They're the ones who you see around the hearth. They're crafting, they're preparing food. It's just natural for them. They're just naturally drawn to it. They're
Mhm.
there. They're there. They're there for emotional support. That when someone is sick or in need, they're right there for that person, and they have just this natural empathy, this natural openness. And then there are the guardians. They're the ones who are seemingly a little more aloof. They don't seem to be directly connected with the children, for example, but they're there as mentors for the children, and they're there as examples, as guides for the children, and they hang around more in the periphery. Uh, they feel comfortable being alone. They're
Mhm.
explorers. They're adventurers. They're the ones who go out and scout, find a new pathway, or they're out looking for where the deer are for the hunt, and they're doing that sort of thing. They're out there. And then there are the coordinators, and they're the ones who pull it all together. They're very good listeners. They're very good at organizing. They're very good at seeing what is needed, and they're able to apportion what is needed for and by whom. So these are the three basic archetypes, and uh, they are apparent in all social animals, whether they are honeybees or orcas or um, birds who live in flocks, or humans, or wolves, or lions, or buffalo,
Mhm.
herd animals, pack animals, flock animals.
Mhm.
You
And
can
does,
see the three archetypes. Pigs.
yeah,
You can see it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And does your awareness, does one's awareness of those, if we can be aware of those three archetypes, does that sort of make communication easier?
I think it does, because it's not what we say, but how we say it and how we intend it to be interpreted. Now, if I have a child who says, I'm feeling lonely. Now, if I know that that child is a nurturer, I can see what the child needs. Oh, this child needs to be with other children. This child might need some help, some support from me. However, if this child is uh, a guardian and saying, I'm feeling lonely, I would interpret it differently, and I would see, well, maybe this child needs some more space. Maybe I need to support that so the child can be alone without feeling lonely. I can support him or her to have some space to manifest this archetype,
Mhm. Yeah.
and not try to coddle and nurture the child, because that's not really what she's saying.
And I does that extends, I suppose. I'm thinking of our companion animals or animals that we are connected to on a sort of a daily basis. I expect that those knowledge of those three archetypes and sort of being able to look at the animal through that lens might also help with communicating with
Mm,
animals in people's lives too.
yes, so true, so true.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah. For example, there's a good example of when I was a child. Um, we were going to get a dog, and my dad took us. My dad wanted a boxer because he thought they were really regal, a regal breed. So we went to this couple who had a pair of boxers, and they had a litter of pups, 8 or 9 pups, and we were going to pick out a pup for us. And we spent some time with the pups because they all had different personalities, different characteristics. And I didn't have the terminology for archetypes at the time, but we saw how the different pups were acting differently, and we spent some time with the pups and played with them, and we picked out a pup that was going to fit best for our family. And there, if we had even a deeper understanding of archetypal roles and how these pups were going to develop and how they were going to fit in our family, what are the archetypal roles of our family members, and what are we expecting of this dog, um, we can find a really good match for our family. So
Mhm.
a dog who's going to fit. And if people know this when they're going out to choose a pet, they're going to choose a pet that's going to work for them.
Mhm. Yeah, that's an interesting way. I've never thought of it in that way before, but that makes sense that you would almost do you find that some uh, communities or groups are sort of missing one of those archetypal roles that can be filled? I mean, do you find that?
Well, I see it in families, especially in here's a good example that I have a big concern about. I see some couples who don't have children, and they uh, adopt animals as their surrogate children. And if they and that's not to judge at all what they're doing. That's fine. They they need relationship too.
Mhm.
We're social beings. We need relationship, and we're going to find it in one way or another. And if it's going to be a pet, if they understand who they are archetypally and they can choose a pet who is a compatible archetype for them, they're all going to be a lot happier together, a lot more content
Mhm.
together. So here's
Yeah,
a way that it can be used.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. And do you think that each sort of unit needs each of those three archetypes to be complete?
Yes. Each
Right.
social units do, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I
And
see.
if we don't have them in our immediate unit, we look for it in other ways. There might be a specific type of movie we watch. For example, if I'm a nurturer and I'm living alone, I might watch romances or read romance novels because I need that close connection, that close emotional connection.
Mhm.
I might choose certain friends or certain extracurricular activities that help to fulfill that archetypal complementarity, that archetypal connection.
Mhm. Yeah, that's it's fascinating. It really is.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Especially because as you say that, I think of the people I know, and actually, it's quite easy uh, to see with some of my friends like which one they naturally fall within,
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
yeah. Um,
This is going to help you better understand your friends
yeah.
and have more meaningful relationships with them, really.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Because also I think it means that you don't expect people to be, if you recognize archetypes, then perhaps you're less expectant that people will be the same, that people will be the same as you.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Which,
This is really important with intimate relationship. We have this tendency in our culture to look for someone who has the same interests and likes things, the same things we like, and likes to do the same things in the same way as us. Well, we're picking out somebody, we're looking for somebody of our archetype, and they don't have much to offer us. The relationships oftentimes get boring after a while. What we really want is complementarity rather than compatibility.
mhm,
And
right.
that's a rich relationship. Then we have someone who's bringing something to our circle of intimacy that we don't have. That's a contribution. And that keeps relationship interesting.
Yeah. And then that sort of swings back full circle to what we were talking about earlier about the things that annoy somebody in another person can be things that they are that they see in themselves. And so if you move outside your archetype in terms of the relationships that you have, then you know you may still face that, but you aren't there's it's a complementary relationship rather than sort of two things that are almost the same superimposed and getting on each other's nerves.
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. We already ourselves. We don't need another mirror of ourselves. We
Right.
need we need who we are not in order to
Yeah.
complement us, in order to nurture and enrich us.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
So you
So
mentioned that you had native teachers. So how did you how could you tell me about that?
yeah, um, it all started. Native people to me are nature, and they're just the human manifestation of what I was already so connected with as a child. And the first human connection happened when I was, oh, maybe 6 or 7 years of age. My dad, an alcoholic, he would stop at the tavern on the way home from work every night. And there was this Menominee Indian elder who was hitchhiking back to the reservation, which was about, 50 miles north of where we lived. And my dad picked him up and they stopped at the tavern and they had a few beers and my dad brought him home for supper. And I thought this was just fascinating. Wow, we have an Indian eating with us. When we were kids, we would play cowboys and Indians, and we had our headdresses and and all of that. And here was a real Indian. And I was just peppering him with questions. And, yeah, do you live in a teepee and do you have a horse and do you hunt with a bow and arrow and all these things? And that the stereotypical Indian, you know,
Mhm.
and some deeper questions too for a 7-year-old. You know, what's it like to be in the woods and to live in the woods and be connected with the animals and after a little while, my dad said, "Hey, why don't we let this guy eat?" We were having chili that night. He had a bowl of chili in front of him, and he didn't wasn't able to get very many mouthfuls in his very many spoonfuls in his mouth because I was just peppering him with questions. And I was embarrassed at first because, oh geez, here I am. I'm not being very respectful of our guest. But I couldn't help myself. I was just an enthusiastic kid, you know?
Mhm.
So I was silent, but the communication did not end. We had this intuitive connection, and he just knew what was in my heart. And we just kept communicating nonverbally. It was beautiful. And then I realized that it's not just nature. There are humans who know and feel and understand what I know and feel and understand in nature. And here's where I came to the conscious awareness that human nature is nature. Our intrinsic nature is nature.
Wow.
And so after that, as I grew as a young adult, I made deliberate contacts with Native people. When I was in my early 20s, I would hitchhike around the country looking for indigenous people who still retained some of their old ways, and I would spend time with them.
Mhm.
I spent time with a Hopi elder uh, in, first of all, in Colorado, and then I went to North Dakota, California, connecting with Native people. And of course, back home where I live now in Wisconsin, there are 11 native reservations within a 50 or 60-mile radius. So there are a lot of indigenous people, and I've had close relationships through my life with probably a couple dozen native elders. All but one of them are no longer with us now.
Mhm.
You know, that's when I was in my 20s and 30s, and I'm now in my 70s. So, and they were in their 70s and 80s and 90s then. So they have passed. Although what they have shared is living on within
Yeah.
me. They're not really dead. I still hear them. We're still communicating.
Mhm. How did they feel? Was that a period where those old skills and stories were disappearing? Were they happy to share?
That gets into the topic of cultural appropriation. And the elders seldom saw it that way. They had two criteria for opening up to anybody, and they did not judge anybody by their race or their color. Um, one is respect, and the other is humility.
Hmm. Yeah.
And if I would approach an elder with respect, respect for their culture, with respect for who they are, and with humility, they were open to me. They there was receptivity, and
Yeah.
one elder, what he said is that if you approach me with an empty bowl, and the empty bowl was the symbol, you know, I can fill it for you. If you're coming with your bowl all filled already with expectations and questions and preconceptions about who I am and what you want from me, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a beautiful metaphor. Yeah. 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 We used to live in India, and um, I always found that people, like you said, if your intention when asking a question is genuine, then nobody was ever concerned about the fact I was female or I was British, or
Yeah,
it wasn't important. So
yes.
it sounds like that
That
was the experience
that's
that
it.
you had.
Same
Yeah,
thing. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, and sort of Was there a theme, a sort of a journey specifically that you were looking for when you met people? Were you looking at their relationship to nature, or what were you sort of seeking within the Native American
Mhm.
communities?
I was looking to close the human nature rift, the human nature divide.
Yeah.
And for indigenous people, they don't consider themselves to be humans and the other animals, as I said. There were the deer people and the wolf people and the tree people and the butterfly people and the human people. And they were
Mhm.
all a part of this greater community. It
Yeah.
wasn't a human community and then nature. They were a part of the what they call the hoop of relations, all the relations together. There was a
Mhm.
human camp and a deer camp and a tree camp. And this is what I was looking for. I felt perfectly comfortable in nature. I was there. The earth was my mother. Literally, I felt it. I felt that nurturance. I felt that support, that grounding.
Mhm.
But I had this rift because I was a human and a civilized human, and I was expected to act and function in certain ways. So it's as though I would flick a switch. I would come home from school and I would throw down my books. And, I had homework to do and such, and I didn't care. I just throw down my books and I would race out into the woods. And I
Mhm.
just flick a switch. That's done. I did it. And now I can be who I am and be in relationship that's relevant and meaningful to me. And I wanted to close that gap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the indigenous elders helped me tremendously because that was their natural way of being. There was no gap.
Mhm.
And they helped me to figure that out. And I was able to apply it. At 21 years of age, I took a vow of poverty. I was not going to work for money. That was it. Any work I did was going to be because it was a calling of my heart. I, out of my entire adult life, I had a 9 to 5 job for probably 8 months. That was it. In between college years, that was it. Uh, all of my work was work that I wanted to do, my music store, for example, that was on my terms and my time for what I saw that I wanted to do in order to help to restore the balance with nature.
Mhm.
So I devoted my entire life to that. And it was because of the inspiration of the native elders and how they did it, how they just naturally did it. They were naturally in tune with nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a moment in those times that stands out to you as being very significant in a moment when those when that gap closed and you kind of were able to reconcile the the totality rather than the sort of polarity of human and nature? Is there a moment when it felt like it became whole?
Yeah, let me choose one. There were a few because it came in waves.
Hmm.
There's one moment I was, about 25 years of age, and I was struggling again in my life, or yet in my life, with my human relationships. And I heard of this Ojibwe medicine man, Mukwageesis, which means bear heart. He was living in Washington State at the time, and he was living at the base of a sacred mountain where many, many generations of Native uh, youth, adolescents were taken up to the mountain to fast for their vision, for their life direction. And I went to him, and I went and I took a petition pouch to him, and I asked if he would guide me on my vision because I needed to find a way in which I could be relevant. I was relevant in nature. I had no problem. I needed to be relevant in my human realm as well, my civilized human realm, because there's no way to just I saw that there was no way to just turn my back to humankind, to civilization, because we're all on the same boat and we're either going to sink or swim together. And I wanted to be responsible. I wanted to be responsible. I wanted to help effect change. And I needed guidance. I needed some deep, deep guidance. So he took me up on the mountain and he left me there. And I was to stay there until I received my vision. All I had was a jug of water. That was it. And a sleeping bag, jug of water and a sleeping bag. And right away, oh, within the first hour, I was there. I was sitting between two boulders. They were really hot from the sun, warming the boulders. The sun was starting to go down, and I thought I would stay warm there, just sitting and waiting and listening. And I heard the call of an owl, and I couldn't see the owl. There was a tree in front of me, a really dense pine tree, and I heard this owl call again. And oh, maybe 10 minutes later, the owl would call again, just enough to draw my attention to her. And I didn't know why. What's going on here? And then all of a sudden, the owl burst out of the branches of the tree and flew straight for my face, and with claws out. And just before she hit my face, she veered off to the side, and it shocked me. It was a traumatic experience. There I was, peace and calm in nature, just waiting for a voice, and all of a sudden, bam! And there was this calm, peaceful owl in the tree just calling every once in a while. And all of a sudden, she just became this explosive terror. And and it shocked me. It awakened me. And I looked up, and there were the clouds. And the clouds were parting. They were breaking. And some clouds formed into the shape of a dove with wings spread. And the dove was drifting across the sky. And I grew up with doves. I grew up with pigeons. They were very close to me.
Mhm.
And I took this as a sign. The dove was flying eastward back home, that I was to go back home. And I was to use this dove energy. This is going to be my doorway, my connection. I'm a bird person. And an owl, I came to realize that owl was my animal guide. So here was all this bird energy and this guidance, this direction. Go back home. That's where you belong. Here's where you're going to make a difference because you have relationship there, you have connection, you know the land. Do your work there.
Wow.
So that was a time where the two worlds came together in a very profound way.
Mhm. Yeah. And so then you went back home, and did that change the course of things for you?
Yes, it's not always what I did, but how I did it. It changed my relationship with my wolf family. I saw that they were here for a reason, and I had some inkling of that already. I wanted restoring wolves to the wilderness again because they have a rightful place there. That's where they belong.
Mhm.
And I wanted to. I bought some extensive acreage up in northern Wisconsin in the wilds. I had almost a square mile of land. My intention was to fence it off and to establish the family there and get them accustomed to the area and to raise a litter or two of pups there without being imprinted on humans. I would stay out of the picture,
Mhm.
and they would raise the pups there. And when the time came, I would open up the fence and let them gradually accustom themselves to the wilds there and rewild themselves. And and that would be the seed for the wolves to re-inhabit the North Country.
Mhm.
And I was going to do this entirely privately, um, draw a lot of anti-wolf attention. Well, I made a mistake. A TV network wanted to do a story on my wolves, and I thought, well, this is a beautiful opportunity to help raise awareness of wolves and their natural place in the environment and how they help keep the deer herds healthy. The hunters don't have to worry because the wolves are going to eat the sick animals and the surplus young. They're
Mhm.
going to keep the herd healthy. And I people to see beyond the Little Red Riding Hood and the big bad wolf
Mhm.
stereotypes in our culture.
Yeah.
And when the program went out, uh, all of a sudden there was so much interest in what I was doing. There was a line of cars that Saturday going by my place, an endless line of cars wanting to get a view of the wolves, a picture of the wolves, you know. And I was getting phone calls. And the flip side of it is that some of my neighbors up north where I bought this land, some of the people who lived in the region were starting to talk. I stopped at a restaurant. There was a restaurant on the main road close to my land. And the waitress came up to me and she said, you know, Tamarack, some of the people are talking and they're saying that they don't want wolves up here. And if you bring the wolves up, they're going to poison them. They're going to kill them. And my intention just backfired. So that begins a long and sad story about what happened to my wolf family. And I'd rather not get into that right now because I would just break into tears. It probably doesn't quite fit with your book anyway. Uh, but if you'd like to explore that more personally sometime, I'd be glad to share it with you in maybe in another context.
Yeah.
But that that was my bridge to bringing who I am and what I'm intended to do in this life to civilization. And that was, I wouldn't say it was a failing because it was ultimately a success. Wolf is back now. We have wolves coming through our yard here sometimes. They're back. Wolf spirit was always here, and my wolf family helped to contribute to that. So ultimately, my family, their demise um, as individuals, helped to support their their kind being able to come back and live naturally again.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you have a wilderness school, an outdoor school. What do
Mhm.
you teach? What do you teach people? What do people come to you for?
It's based on living and learning the way of the wolf. Oftentimes, when I would go and I would have a problem or just a question, and I would ask an elder, and the elder would often say, "You know, I could tell you something, but what I'd rather do is tell you what my elders told me. And that is to go and ask the deer, go and ask the pine tree, go and ask the wolf. Take your question to those who know, those who are living in balance, those who know the way of family, those who know the way of relationship and conflict resolution." And that's what I did. And that's one reason I lived with a pack of wolves. And that's what we're doing here at the school. Uh, is we're bringing people here, and we're acting as guides rather than teachers. We're not teaching them. We're playing the same role in the same way that we learned from elders. And we don't consider them students, but seekers. They're here to seek something. And nature is their teacher. We're just the catalysts. We're just the intermediaries. So we help to set up the scenarios so that they can learn directly from nature.
Right.
That, in essence, is what we're doing.
And do people, um, I presume that some of that part is teaching people or helping people figure out how to how to listen to the answers. Because I don't know that many people, or seems to me that a lot of people in like, you know, as we went mentioned, the divide, people kind of don't even know what to do with themselves in nature anymore, almost like people are so, you know, it's
Yeah.
quite, it can be quite confronting to people, I expect, to sort of, so
Yeah,
how do you help them find their way?
that's a really important question, and I'm glad you're asking it because of you know your effect, and you're a writer, you're a communicator. A lot of people think that, well, I want to connect with nature. I need to learn some hard skills. I need to learn, survival skills. I need to learn fire making skills, shelter building skills, orienteering skills, emergency first aid skills. Yes, that's all important. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And that is not relationship. That's just survival.
Mhm.
That's just learning to get by. What we call the relation the skills that are needed in order to really be in relationship with nature are the soft skills, the uh, awakening as a fully functioning being, attuning our senses, learning how to hear, not just to listen, but to really hear, learning how to see, not just look, but how to really see. The issue with hearing and seeing is that we are creatures of habit and pattern, and what we see is an interpretation of what is really there. It's not what's really there. So we need to see, need to learn to see without bias, without prejudice, without our belief systems, but just to allow what is, to be a sponge, just to absorb what is. And now we can really start learning. We can really start listening. That's a big part of what we do.
Is there some way? So I spoke to somebody recently, and he said that one of the things he asks people to do sometimes is, or no, he said one of the things that he thinks perhaps many people have never done is being in a natural environment where they are not the disruption. They've never stayed in the natural environment long enough to not be the disruption,
Mm-hmm.
and so but if you stay in the natural environment so that you are no longer the disruption, but you are now the part of the environment, then that's when you
Mm-hmm.
start to be able to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there something that people like? I'm just thinking of people at home who think, well, how can I even start to do that? Is there something that you think is like a fundamental sort of shift that people can make to sort of to start that process of seeing and hearing?
Yeah. Mhm. To begin with, it's all a matter of perception. We need to become a movement within the greater movement. Everything is flow, everything is syntax. And when we go and think that, well, I'm just going to sit here and watch, that's being a passive receptor. That's what we've learned. We sit in front of a screen, we watch a movie, we watch TV, we sit at a desk in school, and people are just pouring information into our brains, It's not
Mhm.
interactive,
Mm-hmm.
it's inactive or reactive, but it's not interactive. And this is we're getting back to communication again. It's this web. We're a part of a web, and all the strands of the web are connected to all the other strands. And
Mm-hmm.
here's where we need to be a movement. There's this practice now that's becoming popular of finding a sit spot out in nature, a special place where you go and sit and you observe and watch, and that is beautiful because we're out in nature and we're doing it. However, we are bringing ourselves and injecting ourselves into nature. We are sitting again in front of a screen. The screen now is just nature instead of the movie screen. So we have not completely immersed ourselves in nature. We need to learn how to move as a shadow. We need to learn how to move silently, to be a movement within the greater movement. Then things start coming alive to us. So that's
Right.
the transition. And that can be practiced at any time, really. Just walking down the sidewalk, I can just walk down the sidewalk to go from point A to point B. And what I'm doing is future projecting because I'm thinking about point B. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm going to meet this person, or what am I going to get at the grocery store, or whatever I'm doing. I am not in the present. I'm not in the now. Now, all of that's going to be there. That's fine. But it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
there when I get there. I don't have to create that image in my mind now. I am here now. So when I'm walking down the sidewalk, I can play a game if I want. I can slip in behind the person in front of me without the person knowing it and just watch that person's movements and mannerisms and what that person is noticing and become that person while I'm walking. I'm getting outside of myself. I can watch where I'm stepping. An easy game is I don't want to step in any cracks in the sidewalk. It's just a real easy exercise for connecting with the here and now.
That's
And when
something kids do
I know, I
and
know,
then don't and then grow out of.
just
And
naturally. Yeah,
and they grow
yeah,
almost when they grow out of the here and now. It's
exactly.
when
You
those
got it.
games
You got it.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to become again as little children. That's what all the spiritual elders tell us, the spiritual guides, the spiritual masters, become again as little children. And while I'm avoiding the cracks, I'm noticing so much more. I'm there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what you say about sitting, I agree. It's a lovely practice, but I notice so when I'm out doing things with you know, just the kind of the sort of everyday chores that you do outside. So I'm bringing hay to the horses or I'm cleaning up something in the field and then that's when I find that I see nature is because I'm not sitting waiting for something to happen. I'm just existing in the environment, as much part of it as as any other part of it, because I'm not expecting anything. Do you think that if once you take away expectation, you also have better communication?
Yes. Yes. There's a difference between uh, questioning and being as a question. A Blackfoot elder explained this to me. I was following him around, and I had all these questions about how they used to live, and and I wanted to know some details. And he turned around to me. They were always respectful. They never rolled their eyes at me or anything or criticized me. But he just turned around and he said essentially, Tamarack, when you're talking, you're repeating what you already know. Even if you're asking a question, your question is based upon your prior knowledge. And when you ask a question, it limits what you are going to receive because you've got it all distilled down to this question. But if you be as a question, you're just open. You're the empty bowl. So it's being as a question rather than having expectations or asking the questions. It's a state of consciousness rather than a conscious focus.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's I've been thinking about because we just bought this little wood next door and very happily because we have a not a huge acreage, we have 8 acres. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
this little wood next door and
Mm-hmm.
the neighbor said he'd sell it to us. So I thought, great, because it's this beautiful environment that nobody ever goes in. And I've been
Mm-hmm.
thinking, how should I interact with the wood because it's new to me. I haven't really explored much, but the idea of being as a question as I
Mm-hmm.
go to the wood seems very beautiful and profound.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Yeah, yeah.
Um, I don't know if you've still got a couple of minutes to talk longer, or um, are you able to sort of talk to me for another few minutes? Or
Yeah, yeah, let's take a few more minutes. Yeah,
okay, thank
I'm
you.
very much enjoying our sharing. I like where we're going with it. This is great.
So you mentioned earlier nature speak and the sort of universal language, and could you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I can. Also, I'd like to refer you to Becoming Nature. I sent you the PDF to the book, and I describe nature speak in detail in the first few chapters. But I can just uh, uh, give you an encapsulated version now, which might help with your writing. Nature speak is the universal language, the language of all nature, and all of nature is in constant communication, which is why nature is has the capacity to be in such balance. There's not struggle and turmoil. Trees know where to grow. The animals know where to go when weaving their way through the trees. The water knows where to go. Everything just knows its place, and everything is in sync with everything at all times. What we see as struggle or turmoil in nature is not that at all. It's just a readjustment. And it's all happening in this beautiful synchronicity because of nature speak. Everything is in direct communication with everything at all times. It's amazing. When I was with my wolf family, I would watch them napping, and they would choose their places to nap. It wasn't just, I'm just going to lay down here because it's comfortable. They would choose a place where they would have a vantage point. That's where they would nap. And they'd be laying down, but their ears would be alert. And if there was any noise that they would subconsciously pick up that didn't sound right, an eye would open, or they would get up and they would look, and they're always in contact, always in sync. So it would appear that they were napping or sleeping, and they were, but that doesn't mean that they were totally zoned out by any means. They were still in constant communication.
Mm-hmm.
And it's essential. It's essential not only for survival in nature, but it's essential in order to thrive, in order to have a joyous life. Because relationship is all about communication. And when I feel that I'm really connected, even in a relationship, in an intimate relationship or with my family, if I feel that I'm being heard, if I feel that I'm really in genuine communication, I feel good. I feel good about being with these people. If I'm not being heard, I feel anxious. Something's not right. And that's not the way with nature. Everything is existing, you might say, in a state of joy, a state of presence. And that's what nature speak is. That's it in 100 words or less.
And with your school, you're bringing people back to being able to participate in that process of nature speak?
Yes. Yeah, we're actually doing it in 4 ways. We have 4 nonprofits now. We have the Teaching Drum Outdoor School, and the primary, our banner program there is the Wilderness Guide Program, which is a full year, a full 12 months of immersion in nature. And the seekers come in 1 day a moon. That's it. A moon is about 29 days, a moon cycle. We go by moon cycles rather than months because that's the timekeeper in nature, the sun and the moon. And they come in 1 day to connect with loved ones and conduct any business they have to do. And that's it. Then they're back out for another moon with no connection with civilization, completely immersed in nature. And then we have some other programs too. That's the program most people know, though. And then we have a publishing branch, Snow Wolf Publishing. And the books you have of mine are being published by us, by our own little publisher, our own little publishing company. And then we have the Healing Nature Center, and which is a doorway for people. Maybe 15 years ago or so, I started to come to realize that it's important for me to start meeting people where they're at. Not everybody is going to be able to take a year off and go out in the wilderness, but people have an afternoon to walk a nature trail.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I had been developing nature trails for a while, special trails that accentuate the healing properties of nature, the features of nature, panoramic vistas, and walking between one habitat type and another. There's an awakening that happens when we walk from the woods into the open prairie, for example. All of a sudden we become more alert and attuned. Well, these are magical moments when that can be used. And we're working with therapists now who are doing that. They're bringing people. One of the inspirations for the Healing Nature Center was 2 therapist friends of ours who were saying, Tamarack and Letty is my mate, my partner. We have our therapy practice, and we bring people into our office, and we sit in this square box for 1 hour a week. And we'd really like to wonder if we can bring our clients out into nature. Or we have a trauma recovery group. Do you have a place where we can bring them, where we can be out in nature for a weekend?
Mm-hmm.
And that got us going. and seeing how we could really be of service here. So we developed a special trail system that the mother trail, the one we have right here on campus, is only a half-mile long, but it takes you 2 or 3 hours to walk it because there's so much there. There are reflective nooks, there are special threshold bridges you go over, and panoramic vistas you partake in, and a little bridge that goes out on a beaver dam over a beaver pond, so you can feel the energy of the water, the negative ions that are generated by flowing water, and all of that is incorporated into the trail. So that's our third organization. And the fourth one is the Brother Wolf Foundation. And this is the work we're doing that we're continuing with what I did with my family of wolves, with helping to reintegrate wolves into the human psyche, into the human consciousness.
Yes. There's so many amazing things about the work that you're doing. That's each one of them is so sort of profound. One thing I wanted to ask you actually about wolves is sort of going back. When did you first connect to wolf? Because it was before your wolf family. You already had this sort of connection to.
Yes.
Yeah. When
When I
was
was a
that?
child, when I was a child, I would as I said, I would spend a lot of time out in the woods and the meadows and the prairies and the swamps around my house. I grew up in a small farming town in eastern Wisconsin, and there was a lot of woods and swamps and streams and such and ponds. And I spent the majority of my time there, and I felt a presence. The wolves were gone for more than a century. They were all exterminated, but there was still the spirit of wolf there. And I felt this presence lurking, this shadow, this ethereal presence, you might say. I sensed the spirit of wolf, and it brought me comfort. I knew I wasn't alone. I knew I was being watched over. I was being cared for. I was never lonely in nature. I never felt alone. And that was a big reason. And it's what happened in my life is that spirit just gradually manifested in real form, in flesh and blood form.
Mhm. And
So
what's
there was nature speak again,
yeah.
because it really dies. It's just life begetting life begetting life.
And what did you feel when people think about wolves, they think about, I guess, sort of this essential like freedom or the sort of the essence of the wild. What was the feeling that connected you to the feeling to knowing that it was sort of wolf spirit?
It was presence. The image I had when I was a child was of this big face, this face of a wolf. And a wolf's face is very expressive. I wonder, no, I don't have an image close by, but maybe at another time. It's another topic to explore. A wolf's face is, if you see a wolf's face, it's not just one color like many of our dogs, but wolves will have a black muzzle, and there'll be a dark stripe down the snout and white on the sides and white cheeks, and the ears are light inside and rimmed in black, with black lips and white teeth, and brows, very expressive brows. And the skull of a wolf is on the narrow side. However, if you look directly at a wolf's face, it's broad.
Mm-hmm,
There are
mm-hmm.
these broad cheek furs that come out that give it more of a rounded look, like an owl's face, and it's all for expression. There are all these features that are constantly changing, and this is a part of the nonverbal communication of a wolf. And when I was a child, I would be out in the woods, and there would be this image of this giant wolf face, and there was this presence, this expressive presence there, that it was like blue shadows. It was like shadows within shadows in the woods, and there was just this big image of the wolf always there.
I was going to ask you, and then I sort of corrected myself in my thinking because I was going to say, um, why do you think you had this connection this is a very profound connection to have as a child, but I actually think it's the other way around, that children do have that profound connection, and that,
Exactly.
we are civilized almost out of it.
Got it. It's just natural. It's naturally there.
Yeah.
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 We gradually get dumbed down, you might say,
Hmm.
as we grow up. You
Yeah.
know, our parents correct us when they see us talking with nothing there to talk to, or off on some flight of fantasy or tangent or something like that. For a child, it's not a flight of fantasy at all. This is reality.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually lovely seeing, well, our youngest is now 11, just turned 11,
Mm.
and he's still in that beautiful sort of, especially now on the farm, he can roam, and it just engages in these wonderful sort of adventures in his mind, and in his life. He's sort of, and it's so wonderful to see, because I think so many children don't get to experience that anymore. Um,
Good for him. And it's so beautiful that he has you as a mother. He's
well, it's
lucky.
it's lovely. It's lovely that we've been able to sort of have this untethered lifestyle that they've been able to have. So, would you have some advice for us, for people who might, like you said, might live in a city, or might feel that they've lost that connection to spirit, or the child that they once were, or to nature? Is there what would be your advice?
Two pieces of advice that are practical pieces of advice for people who lead busy lives in the city. The first is to listen to your dreams, because dreams are all metaphor and symbol. When we are sleeping, our conscious selves are asleep. Our conscious selves are in a state of coma, you might say, and our egos are not in control. They're on break, and our true selves start to come out, and our dream selves can start painting new landscapes for us, realistic landscapes that are connected with the greater reality other than the conscious reality of our awake time lives. So first is listen to our dreams. And secondly, take time wherever you're at. Don't wait for that weekend, those 2 weeks in the summertime when you have off. But anytime to ground yourself, it just takes being barefoot for 15 minutes in the grass, and you ground yourself, and this subtle electromagnetic energy of the earth um, brings us to this state of presence. It just takes 15 minutes. That's all it takes. When you have some time to just get off the beaten path, Robert Frost has a poem about the path less traveled. If you, it's very, very well known. It goes something like, if you're walking in a wood and you're walking down a path and you see a fork in the path, take the fork less traveled. And do that. When I'm going across town, for example, I'm going to see a movie, rather than take the same old trail, the same old route, whether I'm going by bus or driving, take something new, explore, open up. Any new stimuli is opening us up to the greater reality. And the more we can practice that, just walking from one office room to another at work, do it differently. Walk on the other side of the hallway. Just mix it up as much as you can. Now, when you're out in nature, everything is mixed up in nature, and we're going to be comfortable with it rather than looking for the familiar. Oh, I have to stay on the trail, or oh, this is the one I know. I feel comfortable exploring, opening up, expanding. I'm just there. And that's the way we're designed to be. And we can be that way all the time. There's no excuse for not being that way just because we're not in nature. So those would be my two pieces of advice.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think those are very important things that people can implement so easily, but are probably going to have bigger effect than they realize.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The rest will take care of itself. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure talking to you.
Oh,
Thank, thank you so much for
like
finding time.
likewise, you're just a beautiful catalyst for this sharing. I don't even call it an interview. It's a sharing of friends. I feel as though I know you. You're just there. It's beautiful.
It's really
Wow.
wonderful. I feel like I'm feeling very buoyant and energized and yeah,
Mm.
very hopeful despite we have a lot of very sort of strange, gloomy day happening here today. You know, those days when the weather it's just changed. I think we're going from snow to just before the rain, and then it's going to go back to snow again. And there's this
Yeah.
dark little
Uh-huh.
gloomy moment in between, and it doesn't feel gloomy at all. It feels very bright and shiny.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yay.
Well, would it be okay to drop you a line if I have any questions or anything to clarify?
Oh,
Or
please. Yeah. I was going to invite you to. If you have, if there's anything I can elaborate upon, or you come up with something new that you'd like to explore, I'd be glad to help. I really like your approach. I just feel a real resonance with you, and I know that what you're doing with this book is really going to be helpful for people. It's going to be a catalyst for helping people to reconnect. Beautiful.
thank you.